So, hello Carla. Today we are going to meet Carla from Spain, and Carla is one of our yoga students as well as a friend. And the other day we had a conversation, and Carla was sharing a little bit about what she does, which is she's involved with ayahuasca ceremonies. And as of recent, she also had a calling to be a death doula, which we will talk about in this conversation, because I think a lot of people don't know what that is. I didn't.
I didn't either.
Yeah. Okay. But let's start with your ayahuasca journey.
Okay.
So first of all, we should not assume that everybody knows what ayahuasca is. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. So ayahuasca is a Quechua word, and it actually means the vine of the dead. Aya is dead spirit or soul, and huasca means rope or vine. So it literally means the vine of the dead. And my calling of that doula actually came from that, which makes a lot of sense. But before getting into that, to answer your question, ayahuasca is the mix of two plants typically, the Listeriosis capi and the chacruna leaves. And it's so wild because they come from the Amazon basin, and the biggest flora and fauna of the world is found there. So how these indigenous cultures found these two plants, and they knew they had to boil it at a specific temperature to activate the DMT, it's mathematically it doesn't make any sense. But the legend goes that they found this combination, the shamans back then found this combination, this medicine, through dreams and through tobacco. Tobacco is a very sacred plant as well.
Yeah. And how is ayahuasca used, and who uses it? You said the shamans.
Yeah.
We're to kind of explain it in the way where, some people, they really never even heard of ayahuasca. So we now know that it's from the Amazons, and it comes from two different plants that grows there. Does it grow anywhere else in the world, or only in the Amazon?
Only there. I mean, you could try to grow it in Bali, for instance, because the weather kind of allows it, but organically, it only grows there.
Okay.
And initially, I mean, we don't really know for how long it's been used, but it can be traced back to thousands and thousands of years.
Wow.
Like, it's really, really ancient. And it holds a whole cosmology. And even each tribe, because it's throughout the whole Amazon, so Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, and even within these countries, there's different tribes and different methods and traditions, but they are all unified by this plant. And initially, only the shamans were ingesting it because it's a brew, it's like a tea. It's disgusting. It's really bad. And only the shamans would take it, and then they would do healings. But at some point, I think it's quite recent, the shamans, I think it's because they realized how sick humanity is. They started to give it also to the people. And at some point, I think it's like 1 or 2 decades ago, there was this prayer to expand it to the whole world. And so now that's why the little brother, as they call us in the West, started to take it. And now it's become super global. And many people are taking it right now.
And when you say that the shamans decided to also facilitate it for people, like the general public, so to speak, or the tribes, etc., when was that? When did they realize that people were getting sick?
I don't know. I know it's quite recent, but I think no one really knows the exact timing. But in the last 100 years.
Okay.
But it's still such a privilege, that we have access to it, because even if it's widespread now, it's still quite difficult to find a legit shaman, a legit organization that does it with respect, following the tradition. So I feel so privileged to have access to this.
Because it also became like a business, right? It's a good moneymaker. It attracts a lot of people.
Yes.
And a lot of charlatans,
yes.
people who...
It's a multi-million-dollar industry right now.
Wow.
I was just reading about it now.
Wow.
It's crazy. the way I started, it was no money involved because it was an NGO. I mean, our organization is an NGO precisely because of that. Because I saw the damage that it can do, you know, the money. I mean, it's not because of the money, but what it entails. So that's why we started, like, I had my lawyer job, so I didn't really need the money in that way. So it was just non-profit. But now we started to do more like for profit. Because at some point, if you want to give a better service, you also need to have it, right? But this is something that we're very careful. Yeah, because you don't fall into the trap of the money-making machine.
Okay, so basically ayahuasca is a sacred plant, right? So it's used in a ceremonial setting where people go on a journey where the mama ayahuasca is presenting herself and coming with some message or messages, and it's traditionally carried out by someone who is connected directly to the source, right? The shamans. Yeah. Maybe you could expand a little bit on that.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend only sitting in ceremony with indigenous shamans that at least have 10 years of experience serving the medicine and that are recognized by their own communities. Because these days, you could come one day and say, oh, now I serve ayahuasca. And if people believe you, they are just going to do it with you, you know, because it's so appealing. Like, it's such an appeal, this medicine.
I have to cancel tomorrow?
No, but it's good to be mindful of, who is a legit facilitator or shaman and who isn't, you know. And for me, after many like mistakes, because when I started, I didn't do it with legit shamans, you know, and I could see the damage that can potentially have, even though still it was worth it, I have to say. And also it was a lesson because then you learn how not to do it. And that also inspired me to then do my own thing. So it was a blessing, you know. But still, that would be my recommendation, to work with someone that has at least 10 years. Or if it's not indigenous, someone that has been with indigenous in the jungle for 10 years, serving next to a legit shaman. Just checking if they are humble, you know, like understanding that they are just a messenger for some wisdom to go through them, but they are not the rock star.
Yeah, the ego can take over. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about your personal introduction to ayahuasca. How did you come in contact with it?
So I don't even remember the first time I heard of ayahuasca, but I know I was immediately interested. You know? But it's not something that you want to Google because of this problem of
being commercial. Yeah.
So I was like, I'm gonna let it come to me. And then my childhood friend had a friend that was organizing retreats.
Where were you?
In Spain.
In Spain.
I was still living in Barcelona, and these retreats were taking place near Barcelona. And so, but these retreats were super expensive, like luxury retreats, like Ibiza environment. And I didn't want to pay that money, you know, but they needed volunteers to help out in the retreat. So me and my husband, well, at the time, my boyfriend, we went as volunteers. And in exchange of helping out in the kitchen, we could do 2 ceremonies. And that changed my life. Like my first ayahuasca ceremony was super crazy. I can explain later on. But it really changed me. And things escalated very quickly because after that first retreat, the retreat organizer asked me to become part of the team as a yoga teacher. And so I did. And then Fred also became part of the team, helping with social media and so on. So we did a second retreat in that capacity, but we were not in alignment with the way things were done. So we left. But still we loved the medicine, right? And later on, we were doing a cambo ceremony with some of the facilitators that we met in that retreat. And it was my birthday coming soon. And I wanted to change the whole way I did my birthdays because usually I would go party and get fucked up, you know? I was like, no, I want to do like a conscious birthday and maybe with ayahuasca. And I had a bunch of friends, like around 20, that wanted to do it, but they didn't know where. So I was telling the cambo facilitators about it, and they were like, oh, we could organize it with, you know, our shaman. Like, so this is how our first retreat happened. But it was super informal. Like, I just rented like an Airbnb house in the middle of nowhere and then brought all the people together, and we just did it. And then the shaman told me, well, it clearly flows to you and that it went very well. Why don't you do it more professionally, you know, like setting up a structure and so on. But before I wanted to have another retreat to see how it would go. So then in Halloween, this was April 2022.
Okay.
The first one that we organized. And then in November 2022 for Halloween, I mean, before every retreat, I pull a tarot card. I love studying the tarot and the archetypes, symbolism. And I pull a tarot card for me and for every participant that comes. And for that retreat, I got the moon. And among other things, the moon signifies motherhood. And the night of Halloween, we did 2 ceremonies. And that night, I swear to God, I thought I was pregnant. Like I was telling the shaman, I was being very dramatic, like telling everybody like, oh my God, I'm pregnant, you know, I was freaking out. And I actually met what felt the spirit of my son, and his name is Tao. But then the next day my period came. So obviously I was not pregnant. But I do think it was like a metaphor, you know, for what was to come. And that's why we call the retreats Project 1000.
Okay.
It came from that.
So the sun was basically your retreat.
I think. I mean, maybe in the future I do have a son that gives me the same energy, you know, the same vibe. But for back then, I took it as metaphorically. And then I created the whole legal structure in Spain. We haven't stopped doing it since then, and it went super well, like very organically, like word of mouth. Till at some point last year, I decided to quit my lawyer job and just go full in.
So who would want to come for an ayahuasca ceremony? Who would you say is ready and could benefit from it?
A wide range, like it's many different type of humans. Like for instance, scientifically, it's been proven that ayahuasca is very good to treat PTSD, depression, anxiety, and traumatic events. You know, so that's good for that. But also, for instance, my case, I did ayahuasca not because I had like a clinically identified issue, but just for curiosity. You know, like metaphysical curiosity and spiritual curiosity and self-development. Yeah, I would say, for instance, as our protocol is, we don't allow people that have schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis in the last year or two, epilepsy, and pregnant women. So if you have one of these, avoid. Also, people on antidepressant pills should avoid ayahuasca. Okay.
So tell us a little bit about what happens in the ceremony. Like, well, you know, how does it work?
I mean, okay, in general, and then I can explain my particular. If you want. In general, you never know.
Okay.
Like, I think if you look it from the outside, it looks like you're in a crazy house because you can see people having cathartic moments. Like some are dancing and having such a blissful experience, but then others are going through hell. And it can be very painful because to heal you have to feel it, and so to feel it sometimes it's a lot, depending on your background and what you've been through, right? Even beyond you, because sometimes you feel your ancestors' shit that you're clearing. Because I do think ayahuasca really acts on your at the DNA level, like it does something into your DNA. And I've definitely felt that, like the pain of my female lineage in particular. I've been doing a lot of work on that, so it can be quite challenging, like it's not something for fun. Also, the shaman is very important. Different traditions work in different ways. For instance, the Yawanawa tribe that we're working with in March, they sing a lot, so it's very beautiful. Like for them, it's very light, the ceremony. Like the Colombian tribes are more dark, I would say. There is a lot of silence, and the music is more like guttural and darker in a way, which I also love. Yawanawa is more like celebrative. They sing a lot, and like you could actually feel that they are sending protection spells surrounding the space. It's very nice. Also, you see people purging from the mouth and from the palm, and there's always a fire. The fire is super key.
So basically, there's a fire, always a fire.
I think some traditions don't use the fire always. The ones we've worked with, yeah.
Okay. And then there is a shaman or several shamans who hold the space. And then ayahuasca is turned into a brew right? So it's a liquid that you drink.
Yeah.
And then how long does it take before it starts to have effect?
Yeah, it can take very little, like a few minutes, like 15 minutes sometimes. Some people after drinking, they start purging or having visions. Typically, in my experience, 1 hour.
1 hour, okay.
But sometimes you may feel nothing, and that can be very frustrating for many people, because then you see the person next to you talking to spirits or some wild stuff, and then you're like, I feel nothing, you know. So then we also recommend taking more cups if the shaman feels.
Yeah.
You know, you can take up to 5 or 6 cups. It's fine. But sometimes you're meant to feel nothing for whatever reason it is.
And do you think it's because that person isn't ready, or is it
maybe they haven't followed the diet, because if you do a proper diet, maybe they are very much in the mind. I've seen that pattern. Many people that don't feel anything are in the mind a lot, like analyzing, like
control.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why the key word is surrender. Surrender, and just, it's like yoga. Like just focus on the breath.
Okay, so here you are. You've been drinking the brew, and you now time passed, and it starts to kick in. So maybe now you can share what happened to you in that first ceremony that you experienced.
I don't want to scare people, because that first ceremony was my worst nightmare. He came through. It was, I think I had a bit of PTSD even after that ceremony. Like, it was so traumatic. But now with hindsight, it's been one of my biggest blessings. But just to say that not all ceremonies are that intense.
So can I ask, when you go into the ceremony, did you have an intention?
That's the thing. Like my first time, because I was a volunteer, right? I didn't have any preparation. No one really informed me about it. So I think me and my husband, like, read in the internet how to prepare for it, but it's not enough. Like, preparation and integration is so important, and we didn't have that. So my intention in that moment was to know truth, and it's
to know truth,
and it smacked me. It smacked me in the face. Because I think I went there with this arrogant approach, I feel, because I was like, oh, I have no problem, you know, like, I'm a happy person.
Nothing to resolve.
Nothing to resolve, exactly. Like, I'm just here because I want to know what's going on, you know, like, we're floating in this rock in the middle of nowhere, like, what is going on? So that was my intention, like, I want to know truth. And then,
but truth of what? Truth of life?
Reality, you know, metaphysics, like, what's the meaning of this? Like, what's going on? Like, who am I? Who are we? What is all this? Because we know nothing. So I wanted some clarity. So I drink the brew. Initially, I feel nothing. I took another cup after 2 hours, and then it's when it started to kick in. Long story short, because it's super long. First, I started to go into the head of what felt mentally disabled people. And I was perceiving reality through those lenses and feeling into it, becoming them. And then I went into this state of feeling like utter sadness, like so much. But like, I could not even cry or move. It was just like the whole sadness of humankind. I was tapping into it. And then after that, because time is weird when you're in psychedelics, right? Time disappeared in a way, and I thought the ceremony had already ended, and I was stuck in that moment, you know? And then I thought I had died, because I truly believed that everything had ended. And then my partner, Fred, was shouting. He was having an amazing experience, actually, of like gratitude. And he was shouting, Carla, Carla, I love you. But in my trip, I was interpreting that as him being like, Carla, Carla, like, come back, you know? So I started to go into this spiral of, oh my God, I lost it. Like, the ceremony is over, everybody is going home, and I just cannot move. Like, I could not move. I was like stuck. And then after a while, I went into this void. And it was like pitch black, nothing there, utter silence, neither, forever. And I think I experienced eternity there. It was so, I freaked out. I freaked out because I think I was observing it through my ego in that moment. Because later on, ayahuasca has brought me to this place again, dreams also, and it's amazing. It's the dark mother, the womb, you know.
The nothingness.
Yeah. But it has that connotation because it's the feminine, and we are in this patriarchal, you know, status quo that makes us fear the darkness and this void. So in that moment, I was still observing it through those lenses of, oh, this is creepy. Like, what am I doing here? Is this death? Because sometimes before that experience, I thought, what's the worst that can happen when you die? And I was like, wow, imagine you're alone forever, stuck. You know, and that's what I experienced. And at that moment, apparently, I was purging a lot. Like people were like cleaning me. The shaman was doing me some healing or something. I did not notice. But at some point, after a while, when I was in that space, I was like, well, if this is it, I surrender. And when I had that thought, something clicked, and I started to come back. But I forgot I was Carla once. Imagine, because years had passed in my mind. And so I started to remember, like, oh, I have nausea, so I have a body, so I'm purging. So I started to like go back. Yeah, and eventually I came back. I was like, wow, this is the wildest thing ever. And like no one ever told me ayahuasca could be this intense. And this triggered a full on, I would say, dark night of the soul period for me. Because then basically I tapped into my main challenge, which is vulnerability, like showing up vulnerable. And 2 weeks later, when I was still integrating all this, I was living in Brussels in Belgium. A man tried to rape me. But now with hindsight, I realized that was all part of this whole process that ayahuasca triggered, because the previous me before ayahuasca, I could escape. So because I could escape, the previous me would be like, oh, nothing happened, all good, I'm not going to worry anybody, I'm just going to play the strong one, that's it. But after ayahuasca was like, no, like, be open about your vulnerability and speak about it. And actually I triggered this whole movement, like, I met with the Secretary of State, like politicians, we changed laws, we changed like local policies for female protection in Belgium. So it was really empowering. And I felt,
because you're a lawyer by trade.
Yeah, not that kind of lawyer. That's criminal law, but environmental lawyer. But yeah, like I know more. I love understanding how the system works, you know, so that we can change it. So yeah, I use those tools to empower.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was like an amazing experience. So that was the first ceremony, and after that, the death doula calling came in.
Yeah, well. So this was your first ayahuasca sitting?
Well, 2 days later, I had my second one.
Yeah.
Because I was like, everybody was like, are you crazy? Like, you just experienced hell, you want to do it again? And I was like, honestly, it cannot be any worse than this.
Yeah.
Like, any worse. I cannot think of anything worse.
Okay.
So I did, and thank God I did.
Okay. Very brave.
Yeah.
And how was the second round that turned things around for you in a positive way?
Well, it was also hard. I was observing like the people that had hurt me in life, situations that had hurt me, and I was understanding that it's not personal. Like when someone hurts you, you're just the recipient of their pain, but it's not about you. So it was a lot of forgiveness. Like it was a ceremony of forgiving myself, forgiving others, just forgiving everybody, like having a lot of compassion from. In truth, I was thinking a lot of pedophiles, rapists, like the craziest thing I can think of, you know, and I was seeing them and I was actually being grateful for the cosmic role they play, because it's thanks to people choosing to abuse children and abuse women or other humans or, you know, war people and so on. It's thanks to them that they choose this way that we can actually choose something else. So they are part of this duality that we are all playing with.
So that's a pretty big statement, right? And I know because I've had these conversations with people, and but I would like to hear your point of view of that, because when we speak, for example, about pedophilia or rapist, and if it happened to someone as a victim, and then someone comes along and says, well, you can choose. Yeah. So what do you mean by that?
With the choosing of us? Well, I think we always...
Like, well, let's say, how would you handle that situation? Like because it happened, right? Yeah. So it's terrible that it happens. But what do you do with that?
Well, I think that's why then 2 weeks later, someone tried to rape me.
That what, sorry?
2 weeks later, someone tried to rape me because I had just had this experience of developing compassion to rapists. And then 2 weeks later, someone is trying to do that to me. And I remember thinking, wow, such a teacher, this guy, because I wish him well, actually, deep down. Like, I do want him to be in prison and to have some sort of like therapy, but actually I don't want him to be like tortured, you know, because his pain comes from somewhere, you know. And I really love the Norwegian prison system, you know, where all they are taken away is freedom, but the way they are treated, it's humane, you know, like they have a nice place to live, they can do activities such as yoga. The only thing they cannot do is have the freedom to attend their friend's wedding or their relative funeral, which fair enough. But I do think the way we treat people that commit these crimes is very inhumane. And of course, I was not raped at the end, so it's, I guess, easier for me to empathize with him. But still, I do think like it's important to understand where they are coming from. You know, like it comes from, I don't think we're intrinsically bad. I think we're born neutral, actually. And depending on what happens, you develop love or fear. So what are you going to choose? And what I mean with I am thankful for the role they play is because thanks to people that choose fear, we can understand what love is. Because if everything was love, we could not see. Even though deep down I think everything is love. It's just, it's like darkness and light. Darkness is just the absence of light. Fear is just the absence of love. Everything is love. This is what I mean.
So living in a dualistic world where we live with two opposites, the dark and the light, and then you mentioned choosing. So would you say that in this particular situation you chose love rather than the fear? You didn't want to be the victim in this scene, but rather take action and do something about it. But do it in a way that it serves you, but also the perpetrator in question, right?
Yeah, because in our petition, we gathered actually 11,000 signatures, so we made it to Parliament. And in my petition to Parliament in Brussels, I was advocating for education. Not so much short-term solutions, but education from, you know, because you tackle the root cause, which is we need to educate our men. Because I think porn and just the sexual objectification of women has really damaged men and women. But, you know, when I started all this petition and I was in the radio and TV and so on, many women approached me, but also men that had been abused. So the common denominator is not so much the victim, but the perpetrator. And the perpetrator tends to be men. And so I do think that we need to educate our sons, you know, on how to treat human body. And actually I think it goes further than that. I think it's reflected on the way we treat the earth. Like this is ecofeminism, right? Like how we treat our mother is how we treat our human mothers and everything else.
Okay, so this is something that you feel that you received as an insight from the ayahuasca, or this is something that you feel that you already had, but this situation kind of presented itself? Or
what exactly?
Well, the way how you handle this particular situation, how do we deal with duality, and how do we accept the dark, I suppose, and do something about it, right? Rather than keep that separation in its box.
100%. And also what ayahuasca has taught me is that the dark is not bad per se. Because I had this idea of darkness is evil, but it's not the case. I think darkness is the origin. I mean, as above, below. And so if we look at how we're created in the darkness, in the womb of our mothers, that's where we come from. And I think darkness is this place of possibility, of potentiality. So it's not bad. It's just still like a dormant. It's the creative state. But then we've attached, and it's a very feminine state, I believe, the way it feels to me. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's a wrong correlation, but to me it's so related to see how we're attacking the feminine in all levels. So we also attack the dark because it's yin, it's very feminine, right? And we give it this connotation, but I think it's different than evil.
Okay, so could we sort of say that ayahuasca gives us insights of what we need to see, and maybe even some tools like to because we see things in that state of mind, which is surreal, right? Or it can maybe be very real, but it's something that is beyond our consciousness. So it brings that mirror into the subconsciousness in order for us to see what is happening in the depth of our consciousness. And from there, we get the reflection of tools or events or whatever it is that needs to be brought to the surface in order to heal, in order to understand, right? So is that a fair statement to make? Or?
Yes, I agree with that. But I would add that in my experience, ayahuasca is a consciousness in itself, in its own. For me, it feels very feminine, but some traditions also talk about it as if it's masculine. It doesn't really matter, whatever. It's everything. But to me, it feels like the consciousness of Gaia, of Mother Earth, because, the plants have been here for much longer than us. And we tend to approach intelligence through our own lens of what intelligence is. But I do believe that we're actually quite stupid in comparison to the plant kingdom in a way. It's just that we don't understand their language. It's like autistic kids, just to make a parenthesis, I'm listening now to this podcast called the Telepathy Tapes. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's fascinating. So they are analyzing scientifically, studying autistic kids, non-speaking autistic kids. And they are actually so clever. They just have another type of intelligence. But until now, we've treated them to a toddler level, education-wise. But these kids have telepathy. These kids can read their mothers, typically the mother, and other people's minds. It's fascinating. Anyways, this just to say that I think we take this condescending approach that we know better and that we are the apex of creation. But I do think the plants know better. And for me, ayahuasca is such an ancient spirit that is so intelligent and so much in touch with the mystery, the great mystery. And so she knows what to give you. So that's why some people are going to feel...
She's calling us.
Yeah. She knows what you need. So that's why you're going to see this specific thing and I'm going to see this other thing. It's like... Wow. So as I was saying, it's an intelligence that literally enters into your system. And so she can see where you're at. It's more like on a frequency level, obviously. It's not non-verbal. And it gives you what you need. And that's why some people are going to experience something completely different to other people. And some people may experience nothing because that's part of the process that they need to experience. But essentially, I would describe it as a purging. That's why you vomit or go to the toilet so much or have you shake a lot, you're purging things out because essentially everything is already inside you. We just don't remember. We are always so polluted by the senses and all these distractions that come to us with the senses, that we cannot. So ayahuasca kind of clears you out so that you can see properly or better.
Because I heard that if you can try not to purge, try to keep it back, is that not how you see it?
No, I think it's good to purge.
Okay.
Maybe, if you just drank and then you purge, maybe drink again because then it didn't have time to enter into your blood and so on. But it's good to purge. Okay. And actually, the moment in which you purge, pay attention to what's going on inside because it's something that, it's correlated to what I'm experiencing.
So is it that we're looking for kind of the death of the ego and understanding the connection to everything rather than us being separate from what actually is one? Because that's kind of what we've been led to believe, right? That we're individual and we're not affected but what happens around us. And then here we are entering into this magical world that can be quite brutal, but can also be very beautiful. And so we maybe letting go of the ego in a sense, or what do you think?
I would say more than letting go, it's befriending the ego and putting it in a place that is balanced. Because the ego can go very crazy. But also if you kill it, you're super ungrounded. Like you need the ego because you're in this body. I mean, I do think that I see a pattern in our retreats, especially that people experience this oneness that you're talking about, because it's how it feels to me as well. That there is this consciousness that stems from the zero, and then it's exploring itself through different bodies and different things, right? But you cannot negate that we are in this body right now. Like even if on a fundamental level we're one. Now you are Andrea and I am Carla as well, and that's also true. So if we're always in the oneness, I think we cannot be that present into the body, right? So for me, it's undeniable. We have an ego. That's how we operate in this society. It's just balancing this ego with the higher one. You know?
Okay. Yeah, I hear that. And so, in the beginning, you mentioned that ayahuasca actually means the vine of the death.
Yeah.
And then you had a calling for the death doula. Now, what is a death doula?
Well, a doula is typically a woman that accompanies other women through birth on a spiritual level. Like midwife is more clinical helper, let's say, or the doctor. Doula is more emotional support, spiritual support. And then I learned that there's also death doulas that support people in the transition of dying. Because actually dying and birthing is the same.
Yeah.
Just different sides of the same coin, right? So that's what the death doula is. But also just to say, death is not just the body death. Like we experience ego death. Or, with change of perception. And this is what I see with ayahuasca. Like for now, this calling is being manifested through the 1,000 project that I have, because people do experience a lot of death in the sense of, wow, they come identifying with their body, and then they leave the retreat thinking like, oh my God, I have a soul, So that's a death, because you're observing reality through different lenses at that moment. So that's also death doula. Like ayahuasca for me, it's the ultimate death doula. It's my teacher, actually. So now the way I work with ayahuasca is I go to university. The darkness, the void, actually chose me as a student. And at the beginning, I was very freaked out. But now I'm so honored. So I can explain, if you want, the story of how this all came full circle, because it's been super crazy for me. Like at some points, I thought I was losing my mind.
But at some point, what?
I thought I was losing my mind.
Oh, okay.
I was doubting, like, am I seeing things where there aren't? Because, like my whole reality shattered. So after that first retreat, after that, the rape attempt, 3 months later, after that, I was still living in Belgium. And I was hosting a female circle, a women's circle. And I was using this oracle deck. It was very powerful. Like, we all got like crazy shit happening to us after that circle. But I'm going to focus on my story. I got the card of the ancestors. And that was it, chill night. I go to bed. And that night, this was April. And I go to bed 2021. I go to bed that night and I woke up with so much headache. I felt like if I was a computer and an old computer and a software that is too advanced for my computer to handle was being implanted into me. That's kind of the feeling I got. Like something super high pitch was being downloaded, but I could not remember anything that I dreamt. So I woke up with like feeling so dizzy, like so bad. And then it was COVID. So I was working from home in my lawyer life and I was having these meetings with clients. And I was not understanding anything. Like, I think I was at the verge of a psychotic break, but the opposite, because I was realizing like, whoa, humanity is in a state of collective psychosis. And it felt like I was breaking free from that, in the sense that I was like thinking, what are we doing? Like talking in these formalities, creating these laws as if we got our shit together, like yeah, like, what are we doing? Why are we not naked dancing under the stars, like in awe of the mystery of it all? Like, why are we living in these ways, paying taxes, like, you know, like following this hierarchical capitalist system that is damaging the earth? Like, I was not understanding, but on a very deep level. So I was very confused, and I had to stop working that day. And I needed fresh air and trees, so I got out of the house and I went to this park, the park where the guy tried to rape me. This is relevant because then when I get out of the house to go to this park, I saw a bus that, you know, the buses that say the stop at the top of the bus, that they say the next stop name, you know?
You saw a what?
A bus. And
a bus.
And like a public
and
bus.
like some
and
commercial or something.
Yeah, like the local bus.
The billboard.
Yeah, and it said Pleiades next stop.
It said what?
Pleiades. Pleiades?
Pleiades.
Like Pleiades is this star constellation, actually.
Okay. Oh, Pleiades.
Pleiades, Okay. Star cluster, sorry, in the Taurus constellation.
Yeah. Okay.
At that moment, I didn't know what Pleiades was, but I don't know, something in me was like, what's Pleiades? So I started to research on my phone, like, what's Pleiades, on my way to the park. And then I was learning about all this mythology that, well, they are in the Taurus constellation. There are 7 stars, sisters. And actually the mythology goes that Orion tried to rape them and Zeus turned them into stars to protect them from them. And I was like, oh, how funny, you know, like I'm reading about this. And then the guy tried to rape me here as well. Whatever, I kept on walking around the trees, and then one thing brought me to another. And suddenly I was reading about the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this thing smashes my head, like super strong. And I was like, what is going on? I think it was like a ball, you know, like it's playing ball, they just throw you a ball, but I couldn't see anything. And thank God, there was this lady that was jogging, and she was like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, what happened? She's like, a raven, the bird, a raven just came down full speed, smashed your head with the wings, and went back up. I was
smashed like, what?
Smashed my head with the wing, like winged me, and then went back up. And I was like, wow, this is so trippy. Because before leaving the house, Freddie, my partner, was telling me that his friend did the branding design for Russell Brand, you know Russell Brand? And the logo, like the image of Russell Brand, is a raven farting. And I was asking him, what's the meaning of the raven? Because Russell Brand is not going to do something, it's not going to do something random, like it must have a meaning. And just before leaving the house, Freddie was telling me the meaning of the raven. And the raven is this messenger in between worlds, you know, goes from the living to the dead. So then the raven hit my head, and I was like, this is weird. And then I remembered about the card from the circle yesterday that was about the ancestors. And then at that moment, I was talking to my friend Marce, and she was telling me, dude, have you heard of the concept of star seeds? And I was like, no, never. I mean, I always believed in reincarnation, but somehow I limited that to the earth. But of course, it makes a lot of sense that the universe is so big, we might be in other places, right, all the time. So she was like, well, you just read about the Pleiades, maybe there is something there. So I was like, are my ancestors trying to contact me? So then I went home and I did a ritual with a card, and I put different stars like Orion, Vega, and Turian. I don't know. My friend told me names. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to put them. And I put like around 20 of them. And obviously I picked the one that I asked, like, are you trying to contact me? And then I picked the one that said Pleiades. So I was like, this is very interesting. And that week I was reading this book of Jamie Wheel, Recapture the Rapture. It's an amazing book. Anyways, and that week I was reading about Akasha. And Akasha is a Sanskrit word for ether. And then I was like, ooh, I've heard of Akashic records reading before, but I never knew what it was. So I thought it was woo-woo stuff, so I never tried it. But then when I read this, I was like, oh, maybe these people are onto something. So I was like, let's do an Akashic records reading to find more to dig more into this. And I posted a story in my Instagram asking, like, does anybody know this? And actually, a girl that was sitting next to me in my first ayahuasca ceremony said, I can give you one. So we did an Akashic records reading, and she did not know anything about this. And she did say, in your previous life, you were in Pleiades. So it was like, okay, but still not convinced. So then I did another second Akashic records reading to reconfirm, and it got reconfirmed. So here I was like, this is all pretty bizarre. And after this, like, loads of synchronistic and weird events took place. Like, for example, I went to another retreat in November 2021, and I had this vision, ayahuasca retreat, and I had this vision of a horned god. And the message was, follow the wild Taurus, the horned cow.
Follow the
wild Taurus, the horned cow. And at that moment, I was like, I don't know what this means, whatever. But later on, I learned that the Pleiades are in the Taurus constellation. And the Pleiades are the 7 sisters, and they are usually known as the 7 Hathors. And Hathor is this ancient Egyptian goddess that is depicted as a horned cow. So I was like, wow, this is all so fascinating, you know? So I started to listen more to these things, even though there was a skeptical part of me that was like, you're saying things where there aren't. But it was so much fun that I chose to listen. And then many more things happened after that. Like, for instance, I was traveling in Spain in a van with my friend, and my friend was talking to this old lady that she met in a market in the south of Spain that she described as an old witch, and they were exchanging voice notes. And their conversation was so interesting. And basically, this woman was describing the topic that me and my husband wanted to portray in our wedding, incoming wedding. So I said, hi, like, who are you? This is so fascinating. And the first thing she says to us, to me and my friend, says, guys, I'm channeling that in another life you were priestesses of Dendera. And Dendera, in that moment, that bypassed me because I didn't remember what Dendera was. But Dendera is the temple in Egypt dedicated to Hathor. But this I connected later on. And also I learned that I'm part of this school, mystery school, to learn about death doula work. And we study the mysteries through ancient Egyptian mysticism. And later on, one day we were talking about key dates for ancient Egyptians. And I was in awe because 17th September is the birthday of Hathor. And that's the day me and Freddie got married. And funnily enough, we had 7 best men and 7 best women, and 7 Hathors, 7 Pleiades. Just so many things like this happening,
Synchronicity.
Yeah. They, in the school that I studied, they were showing us key dates for ancient Egyptians. And they said, I was in awe when they said that 17th September is the birthday of Hathor, because this is the day I married my husband. And we had 7 best men, 7 best women, which is the numerology, synchronistically linking with the 7 Hathors, the 7 Pleiades, and so on. So at this point, I was like, this is all so funny. And then one day I was researching Maya in particular. Maya is one of the 7 stars in the Pleiades. I don't know why intuitively she stood out. And Maya is a doula. And she's the mother of Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes is the Greek version of Thoth, Teute, the ancient Egyptian god. And Thoth is the messenger in between worlds. It's Mercury. And I study now alchemy, and Mercury is the in-between, connects the salt and the sulfur, the masculine and the feminine, spirit and matter. So this archetype of Mercury is also very present in my life. And in this course that I'm doing, my teacher said one day that Thoth to her shows up, and to other people that she knows, as a raven and in threes. And I was like, wow, it is fascinating because of my raven encounter. And also, this is another story, but me and Fred, my husband, came together through 33s. Like, there was a strong pattern of 33s that brought us. Yes, so synchronistic. Anyways, so this happened, and then other things, like, for instance, I had a natal chart reading in one day, and the astrologer told me that I have a yacht in my chart, and a yacht is like, everybody has a purpose, but there is a small percentage of humans that have a yacht, and she said it's like an assigned mission by God. It's like a finger of God pointing you towards a direction beyond you. And she said that my yacht was pointing me to do something that is kind of taboo, and that is kind of dense, and I have to make it light, so I have to become some sort of unconventional therapist that deals with death and taboo topics. And at that point, that also bypassed me. I was like, okay, whatever, And at some point, also a friend of mine gifted me this book about witchcraft by Taschen. And I was reading about Hathor and learning that Hathor is the doula, is a death doula also. So, when I read about this, and in my course, we studied the Neteru, this ancient Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses. And so I learned a lot about Hathor. And then I was like, whoa. Like, I remember I was one day in my bed in Antwerp, where I was living in Belgium, like, making all the connections suddenly, like, whoa. And I had this overwhelming feeling of, oh, wow, like, am I being called to do something with death? But I still didn't know about that doula. And that day, when I was in bed overwhelmed, I was even scared to go to sleep because I was scared my dreams are very wild. So I was even scared of dreaming weird shit. So I just went to Instagram to scroll unconsciously and distract myself. And then the first thing I see in Instagram is a story of my friend Claire about Anubis. And Anubis is also one of these underworld gods.
Mm-hmm.
And I was texting Claire, like, what the fuck, Claire? Like, this is happening to me. And then she was the first one to tell me about death doula, the concept of death doula. I was like, wow, okay, everything came full circle. But at that point, I was lost because I studied law, and this was something out of my field of study, and so I didn't know where to start because it's not like I studied medicine or nursery or things like this, you know. So I didn't know where to start. And then again, scrolling in Instagram that week, one of the girls that I follow posted, my teacher is doing this course. And I was like, well, I would have you as my teacher. So who's your teacher? And I checked out the course, and it's this course that I enrolled because the curriculum looked epic and it included that doula work. So it's when I started to do this. And just to finish, like one of my key dreams that I had, it was October 2022. Fred, my husband, died in the dream, and I was grieving his loss, and I was accompanying his spirit to transition. This happens to me a lot, by the way, that I have dreams where people die, and I have to help them transition. It's super bizarre. Anyways, so that's when it started. That was the first one. So he transitioned, and I was transitioning with him, and then we went into this void. So we didn't even become one. We became this 0 point, you know, like this dark womb. And when I was there, it was the same space that ayahuasca brought me the first time. But then I was not freaking out because I think my ego was asleep, like I was literally sleeping. So it was very peaceful, like super beautiful. Now it's very peaceful when I go there. And then I became lucid, like I had a lucid dream. So I knew I was dreaming. And then in my lucidity, this number 7 came very crystal clear. And then I started to have many downloads. One of them being like realizing how bad we treat death and the dying, and it's just so bad. You know, we don't think about it, we negate it, we treat the bodies, the corpses as if they are disgusting. I don't know, it's all so bad. We don't prepare, you know, for this key moment. And then because I was in my lucidity, I asked a question like, what's the meaning of life? And then the answer I got was, there is no meaning, which is the best answer because we are made in the image of God, and God's primary role is creator. And so if we are creators, there must be no intrinsic predetermined meaning so that we can actually create, right? And this is very funny because, you know Hitchhiker's Way of the Galaxy? The movie? That they ask the supercomputer, what's the meaning of life? And the computer says 42. And the meaning of 42 is this: there is no intrinsic meaning to life. You give it. And this is also fascinating because do you know about the Jinkies? Okay, I love the Jinkies. It's one of my main... Yeah?
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so my main Jinky is 42.
Okay.
That's my life work. I didn't know about it. Actually, we were in our honeymoon with Fred in South Africa that many people had told me you should learn about the Jinkies. But, there's so many things around that I was like, I don't want to get into another one. It's so complex. Yeah. It's my fab.
Yeah.
So it was then in South Africa that I started, and the life work is 42, and it's all about celebrating death. It's all about my life has to be a work because of my line. It's line 5. I have to create some sort of business, like give solutions to this whole thing about death and make it light and celebratory, but in a respectful way, obviously. And I was like, okay, I'm listening, like to all these things. So yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I'm loving it.
So now you're learning. So now you're taking the course.
Yeah, I did all the courses on Jinkies.
Oh no, I mean the death doula.
Yeah, like now I'm more than halfway through. I'm gonna finish. It's a 3rd year long course.
Okay.
So now I'm starting the 3rd year.
Okay.
And then we graduate in Egypt. We do an initiation in Egypt. And then after that, I'll see. I mean, for now, it's manifesting the calling through the ayahuasca retreats that I do and helping people die. I mean, the whole point of our retreats is to help people die well and therefore live well, to prepare for that moment. But I know at some point I will also have to do the actual body death accompanying, but I'm not in a rush. Like first I want to learn more. Now I feel I'm gathering tools, like I'm learning a lot of Reiki, Qigong, sound healing, and other methods that I feel I can then bring to the person depending on what they need. but I let it come to me. Like it's not, because this is not something that my ego wants. It's more like it's like being put into me, and it scares me still a bit.
Yeah, and it's amazing how everything is falling into place, and how you're seeing each moment having a significance, and how they're interlinked, right? And how now you've reached this point where you immerse yourself into becoming a death doula, and how to serve in that sense. I guess it's an education around death, and it's celebrating life and making it into something beautiful rather than something tragical.
Exactly.
And I guess if we look back at what we were talking about, ayahuasca, where we learn that we have a soul, and the soul is eternal. And so rather than seeing death as an end of forever, now this is the end of it, it's just a transition into something else. It's the end of this movie, if we can call it that, and then how that transits into another chapter, but the soul remains eternal. And how because I think our biggest fear of all is time, which is related to death, right? And because we have this concept that we are here on this period, and then that's it. And then it becomes this kind of stress and pressure of like, oh, I have to achieve, I have to do this, and it becomes a rather pressured life. And then we have obviously the curriculum of like, oh, we have to have the wealth and the fame and I don't know what. There's a curriculum to school of life, so to speak, where we've been imposed to believe that we need to follow the steps of how the society is set out to be, and in the end we're just a slave to that curriculum, in my humble opinion.
I agree.
Because my jinky is 55. It's all about freedom.
Okay. That's your life's work.
Yes.
What's your vocation?
My vocation is, hold on, which one is the vocation I have? Life work, and then
it's in the pearl sequence, the vocation, the last sequence.
It's in the pearl sequence. I am struggling to remember.
Anyways, you can tell me later.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Curious to see.
But
yeah, I fully agree, and I do think that the frequency in which we die, regardless of the body state, like you might be very sick, but if you manage to die in a peaceful state of awareness, that I do think that determines where you go. And that's why I train lucidity in my dreams, because I think dreaming is very similar to tripping and to dying. And I think that if you, and my teachers always tell me this as well, like if you manage to stay lucid in the dreams, and if you manage to stay then lucid in death, you can be more conscious of where you go. And this is also what ancient Egyptians said, Tibetans said, like all these ancient traditions talk about. But most of us die with like lots of drugs being injected into us, painkillers. We die in such a high state of fear. It's the same as birth. Like the way we treat mothers giving birth, honestly, it's so fucked up. Like in hospital rooms, like most of the births are being like inducted, and you know, like this is the origin of everything. So I think many people are not the only
first trauma, they say, come from birth.
And also from death, I think, right? And so I guess many people like me are gonna be having these callings now, because there's so much work to be done in birth and death. So much.
It's a beautiful calling.
Yeah, now I see it like that. But initially I was like, no.
Ready? Okay. So I would like to kind of wrap up with coming back to the ayahuasca. I just want to have a I have a question because this is something that I heard about, and I'm curious about your opinion. That we invite entities into the ayahuasca ceremonies, and some would say that the entities can stick to you, and some of these entities are not in our favor, like they drain your energy. And so what would you say about that? Because that could be like a fear factor in going into an ayahuasca ceremony.
That's very real. I've seen actually in life exorcism taking place. Like actually that was a very scary moment for me. One of my friends was not him anymore. Like an entity entered through him, and even the ceremony was over and he was not him. Like I was trying to talk to him and it was something, it was super creepy. Like you know when it's not him behind the eyes. So yeah, I mean the same way that there's humans that may have manipulative intentions behind, also happens in the spirit world. There's good intention beings and bad intention beings, and that's why the shaman is so key. Because if you have a good shaman, they know how to protect the space, and they invoke their allies, their ancestors, their spirit guides, and all these entities protect the space. But if it's a shaman that is not really legit, they don't know how to control all this. Like a legit shaman can see if something weird is getting into the place and kick it out. And if someone still gets into trouble or a spiral, the shaman can bring you back.
Because that was going to be my next question. What would you sort of give as a final advice to someone who is curious about ayahuasca, is now thinking, oh, I want to try this? What would be some of the things that you would suggest and advise them about?
Well, first your sankalpa, like in yoga, like what's your intention? You know, like getting clear on that. Where are you coming from? Is it just to get another drug? And you know, like where are you coming from? Second, to take very seriously the preparation and the integration, because many people are now doing ayahuasca many times, and they think that just because doing ayahuasca they are healed and enlightened. And actually, ayahuasca can enlarge your ego even more. Like the space is full of narcissists. I'm sorry to say. Like many people that get these guru vibes and they get into an ego trap because you do develop some powers. It's like in yoga, like Patanjali also alerted us about it. Like at some point you develop some powers, and if you become attached to them, you're gonna fall. So same in ayahuasca. So also being surrounded by good friends that if this happens to you, they are gonna tell you like, you come back. You know, that's why the sankalpa always, and the humility. And most importantly, make sure that ask where does the medicine come from? Because environmentally also, now that we are consuming so much ayahuasca in the West, that's also damaging the environment. And so I personally only work with shamans that cultivate the plant themselves, so that they make sure that there is a reciprocity, like they consume it, but they plant, you know, and they take care of the forest and the jungles. So that's super important. And to drink with shamans that have cooked the medicine. Because now there's lots of people buying, even on the internet. Like they buy ayahuasca on the internet. That's crazy for me. So you don't know who cooked it. Like it's a whole process. Like it's the planting, it's the growing, it's the cooking it, it's the prayer.
Sacred medicine.
Yeah. And so many people are just there for the business, right? So for me, it's important to understand where it comes from and who are the people behind it serving. Like ask questions about them, what's their tradition, what's their cosmology, and the organizers, who are they, and make sure, because another thing is that now there's a lot of sexual abuse taking place in ayahuasca environments. So to make sure what's the protocol on that, like if you spot any sort of like flirtatious behavior from an organizer or shaman or someone in a position of power towards women especially, that's a massive red flag.
Okay.
Because unfortunately I know so many cases that people that go to Peru, because now there's a lot of tourism around it, and just because someone looks indigenous, it doesn't mean they are shamans, right?
Yeah.
And then they abuse the power to have sex with women.
Yeah, unfortunately that's what we see in a lot of guru status, right? Yeah. And maybe as a little add in there, maybe go in with an open mind to not have any expectation
Yes,
of
yes.
the outcome.
Yes, that's a very good point.
I have to say that in my first ayahuasca journey, I can't even remember what the intention was, but I remember what the message was, because it was like a broken record that just kept going. There is no recipe to life. There is no recipe to life, which is a little bit what you were talking about before. Yeah, there's no meaning, right? So, yeah, so I would say stay open-minded, be careful who you choose to do it with, and don't buy ayahuasca online. And thank you so much, Carla, for sharing your story and sharing your calling into the world and helping people to experience the sacred medicine and facilitating the selected people. How can people find you? And
well, usually it's word of mouth, like friends of friends, safe and nice. But if you find us through this podcast, then you can reach out to us maybe through Instagram. We are Thousand Family in Instagram. Also, our website is thousandfamily.com. That's it.
Okay.
That's the only way.
Okay. Excellent. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you for listening.